Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you for tuning in and checking out my latest video. So today's video is going to be talking about the upcoming matchup between Sergey Crusher Kovalev versus Canelo Alvarez, taking place November the 2nd on DAZN. If you're a subscriber, if you haven't done so, please subscribe to DAZN to watch a hell of a fight like this. This will be $80 pay-per-view alone. We're getting a great matchup. We got Canelo Alvarez moving up another weight class to 175 pounds. And the thing to note about this time Canelo moved up, he's facing a very credible opponent because Rocky Fielding, when Canelo moved up to 168 pounds, Rocky Fielding was not on either of these guys' levels. So it should be noted that when Canelo moves up this time, this is going to be a real test against Sergey Kovalev, and it's going to be a great styles matchup. Now, let's get right into this video and first start off with Canelo Alvarez and what he brings to the table in this fight. So looking at Canelo Alvarez, we have a brilliant defensive fighter who uses excellent head movement, very intelligent counterpuncher, and Canelo is a fighter that uses a lot of different punches in his arsenal. For example, you'll see him throw uppercuts. Sometimes he'll counter you with an uppercut. You'll see him land left hooks to the body. He'll land left hooks to the head. He'll throw four-punch combinations. And he's a fighter that can fight on the inside. He can also attack his opponent's body as well. And Canelo's got a very good accurate right hand as well that he uses. So when you look at Canelo, he just has a lot of very good skills in his arsenal. He has very good balance as well. And he's a fighter that is improving because he's consistently facing very good competition other than the Rocky Fielding fight. But nonetheless, his resume is excellent, and he's got to be given credit for stepping up and taking some of these dangerous challengers, especially where he's a big money fighter like he is. Now, Sergey Kovalev, what he brings to the table in this fight, when we're looking at Sergey Kovalev, he has an outstanding jab. That's his best punch, in my opinion, in his arsenal. His second best punch, I believe, is his straight right hand, which is his best power punch. And those are very good weapons that Sergey Kovalev consistently uses. And when we look at Kovalev, he's got power. And also, he's an intelligent boxer, though. You look at him, and for example, the way he throws his jab, he gets his head offline so he doesn't get countered. He keeps that right hand a little low. He likes to counter his opponents with that right hand. And defensively, he'll give you some steps back or just kind of to the side, just out of range, and then try to use his distance to get back in and land some shots on you. So Kovalev is a fighter who's pretty underrated in terms of his overall intelligence in the ring. He'll also use that jab to the body as well. And if you stay in a stationary guard with Kovalev, he will just keep landing shots on you and land combinations on you. So that's something to note as well. And what's interesting about this fight is a lot of people think Sergey Kovalev doesn't have much left in the tank because he had that loss to Andre Ward a couple years ago. He had the loss to Alvarez, which he avenged. But those are some chinks in the armor of the once almost invincible Crusher when I first saw him in Montreal against Jean Pascal. So there's a vulnerability about him now. And Anthony Yarde hurt him in that last fight, even though Kovalev pretty much dominated the complete fight. So it's interesting to see. Also, there's not a huge turnaround in this fight for 36-year-old Sergey Kovalev. It's only been 8 weeks since the Anthony Yarde fight, so it's very interesting to see how that affects his body. Now, there's two schools of looking at it, though. You can look at it and say Kovalev didn't have much time to recover after the fight, but you can also say Sergey Kovalev stayed in shape then because he had to get into a quick camp. And Kovalev is notorious for not listening to trainers and not behaving during training camps. So in this fight, it might actually be a blessing in disguise for Sergey Kovalev, the quick turnaround. And that leads me to my next point when we talk about his coach, Buddy McGirt. So Buddy McGirt has done a really good job of just getting Sergey Kovalev back to using fundamentals. And Kovalev really listens to him, in my opinion, when you watch him fight. And I think this is such a good pairing because Buddy McGirt is firm, he's strict, but he's a very good coach and he understands fighters. And I also think that he uses Sergey Kovalev's strengths with his height and his long arms and things like that. When you look at Kovalev, one of his favorite combinations is a 1-2-1. So that's a jab, right hand, and then he jabs to get out. That's such an effective weapon that Sergey Kovalev had in his arsenal before, but Buddy McGirt is getting him to use that more frequently and just keeping things simple and using that fundamentals. Nothing too flashy, but it gets the job done very effectively for Sergey Kovalev. Now, when we're looking at keys of the fight, guys, in this matchup, let's talk about some keys for Canelo Alvarez in this fight. So a key for Alvarez in this matchup, he's going to consistently have to attack the body of Sergey Kovalev. He's also going to have to figure out how to get away from that jab because Gennady Golovkin was scoring tons of points with that jab against Canelo Alvarez. Canelo's going to have to figure out some counter shots early and kind of gauge what Sergey Kovalev's doing. I'm interested to see what kind of angles he's going to use to get away from that jab. I'm intrigued as well to see how he's going to get the fight on the inside or in close range that is advantage of Canelo Alvarez. I want to see what kind of methods his team is going to have for him. Kovalev, some keys for him in this fight, in my view. Kovalev's got to keep this fight on the outside the whole time. I also think that Kovalev's got to be careful because at times he gets a little bit off balance and he'll also do things where he'll continue punching and his opponents sometimes time it. I saw Pascal a few times come up with counters on him. And a guy like Canelo Alvarez, you can't let him time what you're doing. So it's very important for Sergey Kovalev in this fight to land his combinations, in my view, and get out so that he doesn't get trapped on the inside or he doesn't become a stationary target in a corner or on the ropes, because that's where Canelo Alvarez is going to have a massive advantage in this fight because Sergey Kovalev, as we know, is weak to the body in a lot of these sparring sessions and other fights we've seen. So that's going to be intriguing just to see how these guys' two game plans play out. When we're looking at advantages in this fight, guys, let's first start with Kovalev. So Kovalev's got the huge size advantage in this fight. Kovalev also is a bigger power puncher of the two fighters. Kovalev is a better outside fighter. And in my view, Sergey Kovalev has a better footwork of the two fighters because Sergey Kovalev has better lateral movement. He's a little bit lighter on his feet. He can fight off his back foot as well as Canelo. I just think Sergey Kovalev overall has a little bit better footwork. I think he closes distance quicker as well when he needs to. So advantage-wise for Canelo Alvarez, he's the fresher fighter of the two fighters. I think he's the better defensive fighter. He's got better head movement. He's a better counter puncher. And he's also the better combination puncher. And he works the body more consistently. And I also believe that he has a better chin than Sergey Kovalev does in my view. And Canelo, I think overall, I would say he uses a bit more variety of offensive and defensive attacks when I look at him as a fighter. Now, when I look at this fight and ultimately, guys, who I think will win this matchup. So, I think this fight is going to go one of two ways. I see Canelo Alvarez losing a lot of early rounds and trying to gauge what Sergey Kovalev is doing. The interesting thing to note in this fight is, for example, I was talking to Darnell Boone, who used to spar with Gennady Golovkin, and he was saying Golovkin hits harder than Kovalev does with 16-ounce sparring gloves than Kovalev's 10 in fights, his 10-ounce gloves. So that's interesting to note because a big question is, can Canelo Alvarez keep consistently taking some of these shots that Sergey Kovalev is going to bring on him, this consistent jabs and right hands and things of that nature that he's ultimately going to have to get there if he wants to win this fight? And that's intriguing to note because if Golovkin has this power that people say he does, and Canelo Alvarez took some great shots from him, he may be able to stand up to some of these shots from Sergey Kovalev. Very intriguing point of this fight. Ultimately, guys, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Kovalev in this fight because Kovalev's got the size advantage, and we've seen so many times in boxing, if you're a much bigger fighter, even if a guy is more skilled, the bigger fighter can win the fight just due off size alone. I think a lot of people don't think there's much left in the tank for Sergey Kovalev, but I still believe there is, and I think this is going to be a really close fight. In saying that, though, guys, I am going to have to go with Canelo Alvarez in this fight, and I'm going to explain to you guys why. I'm going to go with Alvarez because I think that he's got more left in the tank. He's in his prime. I also believe that at some point he will be able to close the distance and land body shots. And I also think he's going to catch Sergey Kovalev with a big counter at some point in this fight. Another key thing in this matchup that made me choose Canelo Alvarez in this fight is when you watch Sergey Kovalev fight, he likes to keep his hands down, and in particular, he likes to counter you with that right hand. Now, if you watch Kovalev fight, at times, what he does is when his opponents start to hurt him, he doesn't fully utilize a high guard, so shots slip through and keep his hands just a little low, like out around this range. When he gets hurt, or if he does in this fight, and Canelo notices that flaw in his arsenal, you can see that Canelo, he's a guy who will land 4 to 5 punches at a time and has very good hand speed. So Canelo will take advantage of that when Sergey Kovalev is leaving the pocket and he doesn't defend fully these shots where he just thinks he can kind of parry and counter you. I think that's going to be ultimately a huge flaw that Canelo is going to expose, that constant pressure and these different shots that Canelo Alvarez is going to land repetitively. Kovalev has to cover up with his high guard to stay away from these shots, but Kovalev's never done that. If you watch his fights, he never does that. So that's a huge flaw in his arsenal. I think Canelo Alvarez will be able to understand that. And I just think that the type of fighter that Canelo is, he's going to be slippery defensively. He's going to be able to use a very good boxing IQ to kind of bait Sergey Kovalev into certain situations. And what's interesting though is this is banking on my prediction that Canelo's got to be able to stay there late in the fight because durability wise, Canelo sometimes he fades too, right? Like Kovalev does. So that's what's very interesting in this whole thing, and that's why it's so intriguing because if Kovalev doesn't fade and Kovalev keeps this fight on the outside, he's got an excellent shot at winning this matchup. I just think that eventually Canelo will break him down to the body, and I think those combinations that Canelo uses and his experience being with such top level competition, granted, even though it's at a lower weight class, guys like Daniel Jacobs are huge at middleweight. So you look at that, and I just think that Canelo might have a little more tools in his arsenal than Sergey Kovalev at this point of his career. I'm going to take Canelo Alvarez to win a unanimous decision in this fight against Sergey Kovalev. Let me know what you guys think on this fight. Intriguing matchup. It's going to be very, very interesting. I can't wait to hear some predictions from you guys on this fight. Thank you very much for tuning in and checking out this video, guys. Thank you.